Hey sup guys, welcome back to our channel. So in this video we are gonna see, what if Naruto was 4th great beast and had harem with Yasaka. This is part 2, and if you want more then please leave a like, share and subscribe. Let's get in the video. Amaterasu wanted to release a tired sigh. It should not come as a surprise seeing how quickly the situation went out of her control. Not only the major gods and goddesses, but also all the deities of the Shinto religion wanted to meet Naruto. She had to magically expand the interior of the royal palace to accommodate everyone. She could not blame them though. Although they had chosen or sent countless champions beforehand, none were powerful enough to match those from other factions' champions. But this time, it was different. And even the lowest level deity could see it, or in this case, sense it. Even in his soul form, Naruto was almost as powerful as Amaterasu herself. And then there was his reputation of being the savior of his previous world. His achievements in character awed everyone, but at the same time raised some concerns. Especially Susanoo, he asked some doubtful questions. Blunt as always. But he had his points. After all, if Naruto were as strong as their leader just in his soul form, he would easily surpass her when he would get a body. If so, then what would stop him from going against them? She had answers ready for those questions, but she liked how Naruto handled it. It had much more impact than her ready-made words. Look, I sacrificed a lot by coming here to help you guys. If you have any doubts or problems, send me back. I don't want to create conflicts with the people I am helping, and I am sure you don't want to be constantly wary of your own champion. With that, he sat down on the ground and asked if anyone had problems with him or even had minor doubts about his motives. They were more than welcome to come up to him and chat. That was not all. He also pointed out that he wanted to get to know everyone, be it a major god, goddess, or low-ranking deity. Needless to say, his popularity skyrocketed within half a day. And any doubts that anyone had about him were washed away. Even Susanoo grudgingly accepted him. But what they did not know was that, even in his soul form, Naruto was a lot stronger than Amaterasu. But to be on the safe side, she taught Naruto how to hide his power in his soul form. She even gave him a beads bracelet, enchanted by her, to help him with the task. The outcome of the first meeting between Naruto and the rest of the Shinto faction went better than she had expected. Yes, the result was good, but it went out of control, in an excellent but tiring way. The gods, goddesses, and deities did not want to leave Naruto alone. Ultimately, she had to put her foot down and dismiss the meeting, to almost everyone's displeasure. Now, she was heading toward her office room where Naruto was temporarily resting. Very few had access to that room, but Naruto was an exceptional guest. As she opened the door, Amaterasu hoped Naruto was not too tired from all the talks, which stretched to a few days. But against all her expectations, she saw Naruto intensely focused on her working table. She did not know why he was so fascinated with something so simple. Naruto turned to her and bowed silently before retreating to his chair. Thank you for what you have done out there, Amaterasu stated before sitting down. You wiped out all the doubts they had and proved your conviction to everyone. I just don't want my reincarnation to create any conflict, at least not for you. Naruto shrugged his shoulders. Amaterasu raised an eyebrow delicately as she sat down. Well, sometimes these small doubts can give birth to larger suspicions which can lead to fear and then finally to conflicts. But the funny thing is, all of these can be avoided if everyone gets to know each other well, maybe over an informal meal or idle talks. Naruto explained, his face holding a small smile. Are you talking from experience? Naruto did not answer that, just chuckled all the while he brushed the back of his head. Amaterasu noticed that he usually would do that when he was embarrassed or would feel awkward. And for that, once again, I thank you. Amaterasu gave a sincere smile as she spoke those words. She paused for a few seconds before finally touching the topic, for which she asked Naruto to meet her privately. I know you need your rest, but I need to confirm these with you. With that, she gave the paper to Naruto. Those who were marked as legends in your world, I could not bring their souls. Other than them, rests were fine. A sly smile formed on her face as she started describing, but I was still able to hassle out 2 more souls. So, in total, I got 4 souls, including you that is. Naruto's eyes snapped to meet Amaterasu, and a while later, his smile matched hers. I am not going to ask how you did that, but thank you. And, Naruto slightly shifted in his chair, I don't want to sound narcissist, but I was marked as legend, right? So how? Well, for you, she released a deep breath dramatically, let's just say I had to go through many hassles and keep it at that. From the look Naruto gave Amaterasu, she could see that he wanted to know, but she was glad he dropped it for now. But she knew that later at some point, he would ask her again without any intention of backing down. Naruto looked down at the paper again. And just from his eyes, she could see what he was genuinely feeling as he read through the names of the souls she was able to bring here. His feature turned very gentle one time, and next, he just gave a small chuckle. Another time his lips curved upwards, but his eyebrows shot up at the end. He blinked a few times, then looked back at her. I personally ask all those souls written there if they want to come to this side to join you on your next adventure. I explicitly told them the costs of such a choice. And yet, they all agreed. The Amaterasu leaned back on her chair, smiling back at her emotional champion, but do remember that after their rebirth, even though the soul will be the same, they will have different names, viewpoints, and looks. The chances of being exactly the same as before, without a god's intervention, are less than 1%. Of course, I am talking about appearance-wise. Yes, they may have different personalities, but at their core, they will be almost the same person. She thought he would take some time to think it over. But his answer was instantaneous: I will accept and love them all the same, no matter what. And I am sure they will do the same without any hesitation. The Amaterasu nodded at those words and gave Naruto time as he once again reviewed those names. Finally, she started again, and this contains all the information regarding your new body. With a small smile, Naruto gently put the paper that he was holding to his side. Then he took the next one. But before even opening it, he looked at her. Why did you not bring my old body? I mean, I appreciate what you are doing, but wouldn't it be better if you bring my old body here and do some magic voodoo on it or something? The Amaterasu laughed openly at that. Naruto seemed to still not understand the concept of magic. But it was understandable, and her job was to guide him as much as possible. But first, I told you about how I traveled to your universe, right? Naruto scratched his chin with his right hand as his left was holding the new paper. You found an artifact around 300 years ago. After the Great War between the three factions, right? Yes, she nodded her head, not just us actually, I heard that other factions also found quite a few artifacts as well. I am not sure why, but we think the balance of the world shifted somehow during or after that battle, resulting in these artifacts' birth. But that is not the main point. The artifact we found allowed us to visit a few other worlds, spiritually of course, especially if the world had a strong similarity to our culture or religion. And one of those worlds was yours. Now, as I traveled there spiritually, I could not bring your body or anything worldly, since my power was restricted depending on the universe, I could just bring the souls. I see, Naruto nodded with a thoughtful look. Quickly, he composed himself and asked the following question: isn't there any way for you to travel physically? I mean to other worlds. She chuckled at the questions, of course she saw this coming. I will give you the details later, but for now, let's just say that to leave our world, our universe, we will have to pass through a gate. And the gatekeeper there is one of the three strongest beings in our universe. These three beasts, as every god and goddess like to call them, are so strong that their names are not even on the core stone. Naruto listened to her words with fascination, but suddenly he interrupted, which was very rare, core stone. That is a large stone situated at the core of the earth, which has the names of the top 10 strongest beings in the world. You can see it after every 100 years. Biblical God created it to maintain the peace between the gods. I do not know what made him think so, and I doubt anybody knows. I will explain the details later. Amaterasu explained. It seemed that she got a bit sidetracked. Naruto hummed but did not say anything. After a while, he asked another question: these three beasts are the strongest here? Yes, but as I said, we will thoroughly discuss it later, along with the top 10 strongest beings in the world. But now I want you to look at the body I am preparing for you. Amaterasu pointed at the paper that Naruto was holding with her eyes. Naruto blushed as he rubbed the back of his head again and soon started going through the paper. She could see the questions forming, but he did not ask them immediately, instead he went through the full report. After he was done, he put down the paper. But instead of throwing the questions, he just looked at the paper with a thoughtful expression. Finally, the first question came: why Oni? You wanted me to reincarnate you using a kitsune body, right? But unfortunately, there are some complications. You know that our universe has many kinds of beings, right? Seeing Naruto nodding at her question, Amaterasu paused momentarily. I will try to keep things simple for now. I do not want to overwhelm you with information. Thank you for the consideration, Lady Amaterasu. Naruto smiled at her, again, not to brag, but I was a Hokage. So I think I can take it. Amaterasu chuckled hearing that. If you say so. Still, she paused one more time to quickly organize the information in her mind. Our universe has many kinds of beings of different origins. So it should not come as a surprise that we have different types of energy, power sources, if that makes sense. We have a total of 6 types of energy. Gods and goddesses use divine energy, and draconic energy is used by the dragons. Beings of light and darkness respectively use light and dark energy. And then we have regular energy that humans can use. The strongest types are divine energy and draconic energy. And they have their own categories as well. I will not dive into that, not today. I will explain it later with a demonstration. Sounds fair, Naruto nodded, but you said there are 6 types. The last one is life energy. It is also known as life force and chakra. But there is something you should know: chakra here is not the same as the one from your world. It has some similarities with the natural energy of your world, but again I must stress that it is different. So, you should treat it as something new. Naruto nodded back. So, returning to the main question, why am I using an Oni type of body? It is because of all the mixtures. As promised, I will add some soul samples from your world into your new body. Unfortunately, not all Yakai bodies were acceptable to this union. After much research, it turned out that a Kijin type of Oni is the best choice. That particular type of Oni can also obtain divine energy. So, that is the reason. There was more information, but she left them out deliberately seeing how tired Naruto looked. She would take her time later and tell everything, there was no need to rush. I see, Naruto slowly nodded his head. Don't worry, Amaterasu chuckled lightly, you will not have a gigantic body or a hideous face. You will look exactly like your previous self, I will make sure of it, but you will have some minor physical alterations. Naruto sighed as his fingers tapped the table rhythmically. She saw that he was processing all this, so she let him be. Finally, he stopped tapping the table and looked at Amaterasu. If you believe this is the best, then you should proceed. Amaterasu nodded at Naruto, satisfied that he had no problem with her choices. But she could not help but ask, are you sure you are okay with those soul samples? Naruto shrugged nonchalantly, well, I did want the soul sample of someone like Madara just to have some fun with his power. But I think his soul fell into the category of legend. But still, for you to get these 2 soul samples are more than I could ask for. As long as he was happy, she was okay with that. But she did not know why all the soul samples he wanted were from the souls of those 2 particular clans, Senju and Uchiha. Best she would find out later why he wanted to combine the soul samples from these 2 clans. X. The Avalon Kingdom, almost everyone was present at the round table. Everyone was waiting for him, their king, to start. And even though they wore blank expressions, Naruto could feel that they were anything but calm. 3 nights ago, the moment Naruto started, everyone shifted on their seats. Kuroka, a turned devil, killed her master. The reason behind such action was because Kuroka found out that her master wanted to perform questionable research on her young sister, even though he agreed before not to touch her. It started as a heated argument, quickly becoming a brawl to a death battle, all because the devil did not back down. After his death, the whole clan descended upon her, and she could barely escape. While she was on the run, she made the decision to come to Avalon. It was not to seek asylum for her, rather she wanted us to make a deal on her behalf. She would turn herself in if we can protect her younger sister. The corner of Naruto's lips twitched when he felt the tension in the room rising. Regardless, he needed to continue. The first thing we did when we took her in was to send a message to the Nekashu clan and Kurooni clan, since they were in the underworld. Next, we created a team to reach out to the devils. Before the team could officially head toward underworld, a reply message from the Kurooni clan came, but not from the Nekashu clan. Despite everyone saying otherwise and knowing it was a hasty and spontaneous decision, I went to underworld, the Nekashu clan compound. Naruto stopped unintentionally as the images flashed before his eyes once again. The dead and the violated bodies of the Nekashu lying all around him, their spirits crying out to him in despair and rage. He had lived through the 4th Shinobi War in his old universe, he had lived through the Great War in his current universe. He was used to deaths and the nefarious acts of vile monsters. But that did not mean he was used to it. No sane being could get used to this. All the Nekashu were killed, they were killed in their own compound. Yasaka spoke up from his side, taking the spotlight away from him. His gaze went toward her. It seemed like she understood the turmoil inside him and decided to lead the discussion. From what we had gathered so far, Yasaka continued, 1 hour after Kuroka's escape, a few devils unofficially formed a large group to raid the Nekashu compound. Their motives are unclear as of now. But, the names of the suspects can be found in the report. Yasaka pointed at the unopened thick files in front of everyone. The Nekashu were caught off guard during the attack, and they were outnumbered. The fight escalated because the Nekashu fought back viciously, thinking their assailants were strays. And by now, all of you already know about the outcome of that battle. Yasaka took a deep breath before pointing at the files again, all the details are in the report. The time frame, names of the suspects who led the attack, and the ones who joined the attack. Yasaka paused, and Jiraiya immediately picked up. After securing the compound, our king and I devised a quick plan to intercept the execution of the Shirin, the younger sister of Kuroka. After rescuing the young Shirin, our king approached Satans and the devils, with the full intention of hearing them out. They spit on his goodwill, figuratively. Jiraiya let out a cold smile, so, our king broke their strongest devil, literally. When Jiraiya stopped, no one else picked up after him. For a moment, only heavy silence reigned inside the room. So, what is our next course of action? Sylvia Lightwood, another Fae of the Old, asked. We fight back. Magari, the Nekomata with 7 tails, growled out her words. We tore off the facade of the new devils and showed the world that these vile beings did not change. Her vicious gaze turned to the only empty seat. It seems, even though this meeting is of utmost importance, we have an absentee. I know you are livid, Megari, more than any of us. And you have every right to be, Yasaka's gentle voice placated the angry Nekomata, somewhat at least. As for our absentee, none of us here can deny his remarkable contributions to our kingdom, Yasaka pointed at the empty seat, but keep in mind that, when he joined us, he was quite resolute in maintaining his neutrality. A neutrality he cannot maintain, not this time. He must choose a side. And the way current events are transpiring, he will, Jiraiya interrupted with that smug tone of his. A tone everyone was familiar with. He knew something that others did not know, not yet. Do you have something to share? August spoke up from the side. The smug look on Jiraiya's face in an instant turned into a calculative one. Just know this, if the current situation goes to an extreme state, he will not betray us, and he will not help the devils, not without letting us know about it. He raised his arm to stop Megari from interrupting him, and that is all we can ask of him for now. The silence fell onto the room once again. Naruto knew that they were, again, waiting for him. We had a solid contract, which should have ensured the safety of the Nekashu clan. But it did not. It was hard to keep his emotions in check. Naruto knew why, but he pressed on. If the roles were reversed, they would have demanded the heads of the culprits. And if we were to disagree, they would have forcibly invaded our lands and taken the heads. They would have trampled on our land as if it was theirs. They would flaunt their might and show us, to our faces, how insignificant we are. And then, they would tell the world that they had only done what was right, nothing more, nothing less. Naruto smiled, an empty and hollow one, so we will do the same to them, nothing more, nothing less. The decision was made. The goal was clear. Honestly, it was pretty clear from the start when he saw the stance of the devils in the stadium. But now, it was his job to choose the best path leading to that goal. The path where his people come out on top with the least amount of bloodshed. X. The underworld. Zekrom Bale's gaze went toward the door when he heard the footsteps. A moment later, Ajuka opened the said door and came inside. His face was stiff, and he looked apologetic as he addressed their guest. I am sorry, Sun Wukong, but it seems Surziches cannot come because his meeting with the clan heads is not going to end anytime soon. I hope me being his replacement will not hinder our discussion. Ajuka's lies were all part of his plan. They were trying their hardest to hide the fact that Surziches lost so badly in a fight that he went into a coma. If that information were to leak, he would lose a lot of political cards, which Zekrom was sure the devils needed the most at this time. But it would all go to waste if his hunch regarding the Yaokai faction were proven wrong. And this was where Sun Wukong came in. It is better this way, I suppose. Sun Wukong then turned toward the last member inside this private room. Before we start, here is my end of the deal. After this, my debt to you, Mephisto, and an extension to the devil faction will be fully cleared. Also, remember that I will not be revealing anything I am sworn to keep a secret. From those words, Zekrom understood that one of his premonitions was on spot and how the discussion would turn out. It seemed that Naruto Otsutsuki did not reveal that he defeated Surziches Lucifer. I hope you will not deny answering most of our questions under the guise that you are to keep them as secrets, Zekrom pointed out. Wukong snorted openly at him, please do not compare my honor to yours. It was an insulting comment and gesture, but to Zekrom, it had no effect. He turned toward Mephisto and nodded, who got the hint. Sun Wukong, could you tell us what you know about the Yaokai faction? Mephisto asked. The smile on Sun Wukong's face after hearing the question greatly worried Zekrom. How ignorant you are was what the old monkey's expression told him. You really do not know anything, do you? Just as he feared, that was how Wukong answered. But without waiting for anyone, he continued, taking a blow from his old pipe, there is no more, the Yaokai faction. What all of you are looking for is the Avalon Kingdom. The kingdom was formed 10 years ago when Naruto Otsutsuki married Lady Yasaka, who, at that time, was the leader of the former Yaokai faction. It is unclear, but I believe the Shinto faction has some hands in this unification, since the capital city of the Avalon Kingdom is called Amaterasu. How much support did they give? Now that is something no one knows as of yet. Zekrom frowned. The severity of the situation became worse if the Shinto faction allied with the Avalon Kingdom. Wukong took another puff and went on, I have seen many wonders around the supernatural world, but I have never seen such a miracle. The city Amaterasu. Every corner, every street, every building has a charm of its own. Has its own story to tell. But what struck me was the people. It did not matter if you had horns or tails, white wings or black wings, light energy or dark energy, hideous face or exquisite features, everyone was mingling with one another casually and had silent respect for others. There were no masks, no hiding, everyone was going on with their daily lives in their true forms. Yes, many of them were Yaokai, but it did not look like they had any special privilege because of their race. He chuckled at the end, there is so much, but I do not think I can describe it with words alone. Can you tell us where their capital is? Ajuka asked. Zekrom frowned again, but he did not show it through his outer appearance this time. He knew that it was the wrong question to ask, and just as he thought, that I cannot tell. The answer was fast and short. I am sure that by now you know of our. Ajuka was rudely cut off as Sun Wukong snorted at him, even though his eyes could not be seen because of the strange shades he was wearing. Zekrom could tell that the old monkey's gaze held no respect toward them. Yes, everyone, every supernatural faction, knows about the Nekashu massacre, but not from the devil's perspectives. Sun Wukong let out a humorless chuckle. Zekrom could feel the blood draining from his face. It could not be. The old monkey continued, I think by today, every faction, from top governors to mere civilians, learned about the massacre. The Avalon Kingdom has released copies of your agreement with them, along with a statement of the supposed convict Kuroka. They also released pictures of the Nekashu clan compound, or whatever was left of it. A sneer on Sun Wukong's face was apparent this time. No one is buying the bullshit you are spreading. This was the worst outcome that Zekrom could expect. The devils had royally fucked up. There was no sugarcoating this event. Was he frustrated at what the devils did? No. The devils were the embodiment of the 7 sins. They were bound to do immoral deeds. Telling a devil to follow a righteous path was like telling a wild tiger to go vegan. It was just not possible. So, he was not frustrated at what the devils did, but he was irritated at how they did it. This was not the first time that some devils, be it the older generation or the younger one, would group up together to perform malicious activities. But those were all done in secrecy. If someone would slip in any way, then they would shrewdly shift the blame on the stray. After all, they had an image to maintain. But this time, the incident went out of control. If it were a skirmish, heck, even a nasty battle would have been fine, but a massacre out in the open? Something was amiss. After the declaration of the Yaokai king, he immediately did some personal investigation. He already knew all the names of the devils who were there. So he quickly organized a private meeting with the older ones that participated in this mess. What he understood was that it was the younger ones who initiated this fight. And it was not clear, but some of the older devils pointed out that it felt like they were being incited. And that was all he needed to know. It did not matter to him if the incitement was strong or weak or that, in the end, the acts were carried out by the devils only, as long as he could use some solid points to shift the blame or at least defend themselves. So Zekrom asked Seraphol, since she oversaw foreign affairs, to spread out the details of the Nekashu incident. Of course, it had some slight fabrication, and it put the blame on a third party. For now, they were pinning the blame on the old devils. But the reasons he included should have been solid. Of course, to increase the validity of his claims, he asked many guilty devils to examine their minds. The results, of course, were slightly altered to show that they were ensnared by some sort of mind spells. Even though Seraphol had an issue with her behavior, he trusted her capabilities. But for the Avalon Kingdom to spread the news faster than them and to more factions told him just how competent they were. It seemed like he kept underestimating them. Who do you believe? Mephisto asked. You have to understand something here, Mephisto. Wukong turned toward Mephisto, his voice grim. First and foremost, the severity of the situation cannot be taken lightly. Yes, the whole thing started because of the crime of one Nekashu. Yes, the fight was initiated by some devils. But this is a massacre we are talking about. A massacre carried out by the devil on foreign soil. And the worst part is that the devil faction did not inform the Avalon Kingdom what transpired here. You went on to execute a little girl to please your people. What was the rational thinking behind this? Zekrom did not say anything. He knew that the way the old monkey behaved, he would not trust a single word from him or any devils. Now, if this is all, then I will be leaving. Before Sun Wukong could get up, Ajuka stopped him. You did not tell us anything other than their faction's name. Sun Wukong did not stop. He got up, took a long puff, and then turned toward Ajuka. Naruto Otsutsuki, the first king of the Avalon Kingdom, is believed to have reached the ranks of the top 10 strongest beings in the world. The might of their military is quite unknown, but I heard that the mightiest individuals of the kingdom are given a title known as Deinkai. It is similar to how you, the old monkey pointed at Ajuka, used the name Beelzebub as a title. I heard that quite a few of the Deinkai title holders are ultimate class Yaokai. And from what I have seen, I can clearly tell that they are the most advanced faction in terms of magic and technology. Lastly, I pointed out this before, but it seemed it eluded your mind, but the kingdom may be associated with the Shinto faction. When he was done, he took another puff. Is that enough, boy? Silence fell upon the room, but just for a moment. Zekrom looked at Wukong. As a guest, we are showing as much hospitality as we can, whereas you are doing nothing but belittling us. Do you realize who you are speaking to? A pause before Wukong burst into laughter, not a mocking one but a genuine laughter, and here I thought that you devils have changed. But it seems I was wrong. It was always about you first, everyone else later. His laughter turned into small chuckles. I do realize who you are, but do you realize who I am and whom I serve currently? Then his gaze swept through the room. I will take my leave now. And he did not wait for a second longer, as Sun Wukong was gone through a custom teleportation spell. The room once again became silent. After some time passed, Zekrom stood up and without saying a word, he left the meeting room. Zekrom directly came to his private chamber. Contrary to his whole compound or any of his other personal rooms, this was a simple room. It did not have many things, including furniture, but one object stood out from the rest. Silently he walked toward the chair and before sitting down, his fingers gently brushed the arm of the chair. This habit was formed 200 years ago when the new Satans drove the original ones away and he finally got what he always wanted. Lucifer's chair, a symbol of true authority and a reminder that he was not a mere servant anymore. His reminiscing about the past stopped when he saw the table before him. The table was custom made to match the chair. On top of it, there was a chessboard and the pieces were placed neatly in their starting place, except the black side was missing the king. He waved his hand over the board and the two black bishop pieces vanished. On day 1, after the massacre, the strongest devil ever to live was soundly defeated. On day 2, after the massacre, the 200 years of the clean political image of the devil faction was tarnished. 5 more days, Zekrom sat down on the chair. In the chess game, the death of a king would result in an instant defeat. Because that was the rule. But the reality was completely different. Since in the actual world, there were no rules, no limitations. He had lived for thousands of years. He saw firsthand that victory could still be achieved with a single pawn piece, of course it was rare. It was not easy to get back up when his side was in pieces, but it was not impossible either. So would they get the final victory? The thought made Zekrom laugh, a faction created since the birth of men against a 10-year-old kingdom. Still, he would have to tread carefully. He had already underestimated them twice. His mind then went back to the core of the problem. The incident had one abnormality. Someone or something or some organization subtly initiated the massacre in a way that would put the entire blame on the devil faction. And it was done perfectly, a 10 out of 10 in execution, if Zekrom was being honest. But the question was, who was this third party targeting? Was it the devil faction? If so, the culprits would be the descendants of the original Satan. But the only devil who could pull this off was Rizavam. The conclusion made him concerned. After all, Rizavam was very shrewd like his father and Zekrom. One of the main reasons they won the civil war was because Rizavam did not participate directly. Zekrom was sure they could still win even if he joined the war, but with many more casualties. But what if the enemy was after the Avalon kingdom? Regardless, it was time to pull some strings. Even if the kingdom got 2 strikes first, he had no intention of giving them the third one. So, what do you think? The Amaterasu could not help it. Her lips curved into a satisfied smile when she saw Naruto's reaction. She loved how Naruto's honest facial expressions and body gestures sometimes answered her questions rather than his words. Holy shit. This body looks exactly like my old one. I mean, other than those horns and sharp canine-like teeth, which look awesome by the way, everything is spot on. The Amaterasu's lips formed an amused smile. I may not be one of the strongest around here, but I am one of the leaders of a pantheon. Creating a replica of your old body was just child's play. Hearing her words, Naruto turned his head to face and gave her a knowing smile. A pause later, Amaterasu sighed and started rubbing her forehead. Yes, the body was not the issue, and yes, I underestimated how difficult it was to combine those 2 particular types of soul samples. But, the smile returned on her face, you will be pleased to hear that the merge was a success. But there is something strange about these 2 soul samples. After these 2 soul samples merged, they started acting as one instead of 2. Really Naruto's tone and expression surprised her. This was the first time she had seen him so excited. Yes, Amaterasu delicately raised one of her eyebrows at him. What is more surprising is that the merged sample is not only acting as the core DNA of this body, but it is also merging with other DNAs. It is subtle, for now. And the only reason this did not raise any concerns is because you said that this was a possibility. Naruto, Amaterasu noticed that Naruto still had that excited look on his face. Is it just these 2 particular people, or is there something about their bloodline? It's secret. Whatever Amaterasu was expecting, this was clearly not it. Naruto laughed. I am not hiding anything here, Lady Amaterasu. It is just that I want to see the result first before telling you about these 2 clans' bloodlines as you said. Suddenly, he had a melancholic look as he glanced at his new body. These 2 clans had a rich history, and their lineage goes back to the very beginning of our world. If everything works out well, I will take my time and tell you about them. About their struggles, ambitions, and fates. Naruto turned to face her and smiled, that carefree disarming smile of his. Maybe you should invite Susanoo and Tsukiyomi as well. I have a feeling they will greatly enjoy this as well. Of course, when I am ready to share that is. Suddenly he made a sheepish expression. Well, after Susanoo stops jazzing me around for that prank I pulled. Do you think he has calmed down? At least enough for me to go to the bars. The Amaterasu snorted and immediately hid her face behind a conjured hand fan. An ancient goddess like her would not snort like that. But then again, that was the charm of their new champion. It had been 2 months since Amaterasu brought Naruto to their dimension. And she could say with complete honesty that she had never seen the Shinto faction brimming with so much joy and spirit. It was all because of their champion. He was a helpful and kind man by heart, there was no denying that. No matter the time or the status of the deity, Naruto would always lend a helping hand. And the way he could make others open up to him was really admirable. But that was not all. His mischievous pranks kept everyone at an edge, in a positive way, so to speak. His pranks were never harmful, instead the sole purpose of his pranks was to bring smiles to everyone's faces, most of the time. After all, there were times when his pranks went out of control. Like last week, when he thought that the statue of Susanoo lacked creativity, so he gave a helping hand. In her entire lifetime, she had never seen a statue so colorful that it looked intimidating. Needless to say, for the whole day, Naruto was chased by Susanoo because of this. Even she was targeted a few times. Of course, the pranks Naruto planned for her were very different and unique, because the aim of those pranks was to make her day all the more interesting. Chuckling, Amaterasu tried to focus on the topic at hand, I will keep that in mind. As for your body, she created hundreds of paper talismans which immediately started covering the body completely, from head to toe. Whoa, I look like a mummy there. The childlike expression of his brought a smile to her face, I will personally monitor the body's progress until it stabilizes completely. I may need to conduct a few more tests. Naruto gave her a questioning look, I thought the body had been stabilized already. Theoretically, yes, Amaterasu sighed, but, as I mentioned just now, after the two soul samples from your world merged into one, though it is subtle, it is changing the body. And the changes are quite substantial in my opinion. Merging with other DNAs, and yet from an outer perspective, it is not showing any changes. It is as if instead of merging, that particular soul sample is absorbing other elements inside the body while retaining their qualities. A truly marvelous feat, yes, but an unknown factor that I do not want my champion's body to have. Naruto's eyes softened momentarily before he started to laugh, alright, Lady Amaterasu. I will leave all these complex matters in your hands. But, please remember that if you need any help, don't hesitate to ask me. He paused as he frowned, you know what, please let me know if you need any help. I am quite bored right now. Amaterasu chuckled, bored of hiding from Susanoo, her answer was a sheepish look, thank you for your offer, but I think you may be busy for the next few days. Seeing the questioning look on Naruto's face again, Amaterasu decided to elaborate, first of all, I must say, I am quite impressed at the speed you learned about our faction. Instead of gaining knowledge about Shinto faction from books and us, you took it a step further. You interacted with others, visited places, and even hung out at local gathering spots. Truly, Amaterasu's gaze softened as she looked at Naruto, you have a hero's heart. Naruto chuckled as he started to rub the back of his head. Now that you have learned as much as possible about our faction, I think it is time for you to learn about others. Not just factions, but other, let's say, wonders about this universe. Naruto sat straighter and leaned toward Amaterasu. With a nod, she started her explanation, I told you about the core stone, right? We can only see the large stone at the Earth's core after every 100 years. I think I should start with this. Why the time gap? An expected question, so it was easy for Amaterasu to answer, well, that is one of the rules of the biblical god, creator of the core stone. I do not know how he does it, but the stone only appears after every 100 years or so. And the reason he created the core stone is to keep the peace between the factions. A lot of us are dissatisfied with the method, but we cannot argue about it since it's doing the job. It is not perfect, but at least it is better than nothing. Amaterasu chuckled at Naruto's silent inquiry look, the stone has the names of the top 10, the strongest top 10 beings in our dimension. As for how the strength of the top 10 is measured. Simple, by comparing their power to the biblical gods. In a way, it works like this, the first in the top 10 list is the closest to the biblical god in terms of power and abilities, and the second one is the second closest, and it goes on like this. Amaterasu explained. So, he is the strongest one up there? Naruto asked. But he is. He is the strongest and the oldest among us. He is also the one who created the heaven realm and hell realm. And if some old records are to be believed, then he had not only reformed the earth so that the first humans could live there, but he also protected them from the dragons and other apex predators. Suddenly, she sighed, but even with all his might and power, he still cannot face the menaces known as the three beasts. Naruto hummed. Then he shot his next question, but if he is weaker than those three ancient dragons, how come he defeated the strongest amongst them, Trihiksa? Good question, Amaterasu chuckled, but there is no solid record of the fight. The only thing that we are certain of is that he sealed Trihiksa with the help of the four horsemen and Tremurti. How did the fight start or how it ended, or even when did it happen? Most of us do not know any of it. At first, we thought that Trihiksa was not even real. Some of the gods from various factions were quite persistent about it. But then Office confirmed that it was real and stronger than her. That shut down most of those gods. No one asked him directly. I mean, this is huge. The biblical God is one of the most reclusive gods I have ever seen, or maybe he just does not want to associate with other gods, Amaterasu chuckled. Regardless, the fact remains that he is the strongest god alive, far overpowering and outranking any other gods or goddesses. And since the biblical god has no intention to take over other factions, no one wants to mess with him directly and deliberately, in fear of turning him against their factions. Naruto voiced out his thought. Yes, and then there's the fact that the beings in the high tier of the top 10 do not want any conflicts. But it does not stop the factions from having a small squabble here and there with one another, but all of us make sure not to escalate the squabbles into an all-out war. Amaterasu added. What about the Great War? Naruto asked. That's what happens when the strongest and the largest faction have a civil war. Although the devils and the fallen consider themselves as separate factions, to the rest of the supernatural world, we consider the three faction as one single faction. And the Great War also gave us a glimpse of what would happen if a full-scale faction war breaks out. Amaterasu explained. I see, Naruto paused for a moment before continuing, later, I will go through all the faction civil wars and take notes. It may come in handy. Amaterasu nodded at Naruto's idea. A moment later, she spoke, do you have any more questions? Dinner is going to be served soon. Yeah, one last question, Naruto started to rub the back of his head, how does a god or goddess become stronger? I get a feeling it is not just simple training, like us normal folks. She knew why Naruto was feeling awkward about asking such a question. Just yesterday, when they were discussing their faction standing, Amaterasu had to let out some harsh truths. One was about their faction being currently amongst the lower side of the mid-rank in overall faction ranking. She blamed it on the civil war of the devil faction, which weakened some of the most powerful Yokai clans. She did give him the details, but was glad that Naruto was very considerate throughout the whole time. He did not ask anything and just listened. Truly, he was an extraordinary being. But, it seems I forgot to tell you one of the most important details. Amaterasu chuckled, to become stronger is both simple and at the same time, hard for us. We get our powers from two sources, regalia and prayer. Regalia can be considered as divine artifacts that some of us use, mostly the top ranks in each faction, since it is tough to create. The simplest way to make regalia is to defeat a strong entity and then use its solar corpse to make one. But if the entity is not strong enough or the procedure of the creation fails, instead of regalia, we will get an instrument for the mortals. How do you know which is which? Naruto asked. Simple, regalia will possess divinity which only us, gods or goddesses, can use. If it does not, then it is just a failure. Amaterasu answered. She took a breather before continuing, as for prayer, it varies from faction to faction. For some factions, it is just getting tributes in various forms from their believers. And for some factions, it is the form of praying to their gods or goddesses. This prayer from our believers strengthens our divinity. So, in a simpler term, regalia gives us different kinds of powers and abilities, and prayer strengthens the core of our being. I see, Naruto's gaze shifted downwards as he started to tap the desk lightly with his index finger. The mature look Naruto had now was opposite from what he had just moments ago. Suddenly, his gaze shifted again and his eyes met hers. What about training and self-improvement? I may be a bit biased here, but I think hard work can also be considered as another alternative. Maybe, Amaterasu tried to sound positive, but it was hard for her, since she had seen some genuinely terrifying beings with powers that could give nightmares even to the gods and goddesses. Naruto did not say anything for some time. The silence stretched for a few minutes before one of Amaterasu's servants came and stated that the dinner was ready. Shall we continue this after dinner then? Amaterasu asked when the servant left. Naruto nodded. But as they got up from their chairs, Naruto turned toward Amaterasu, I think I know what I need to do first. Amaterasu stopped but stayed silent. Then he gave her that charming disarming smile of his again, it's to show you and everyone here that even hard work and dedication can be just as terrifying. The Avalon Kingdom, Naruto was furious. If he wanted to, he could have defeated both Surziches and Ajuka together at the stadium, right in front of every devil present there. It would have absolutely crushed their spirits and beliefs. But he did not because, 1, there would have been many casualties. He avoided that not because he cared for the devils, but to show that he was not like them. He would not take the lives of the innocents just because he could. And 2, he wanted to avoid revealing what he could do. His techniques and skills were very unique. Even his fighting style was considered abnormal in this world. And so, he would fight away from everyone's prying eyes most of the time. And if he could not, then he would go with a minimal power but high efficiency method. This time was not any different. Regardless, he knocked down their strongest devil and gave the whole faction 1 week time. His messages were simple. The devil faction was not invincible. And all the Avalon Kingdom wanted was justice, fitting and merciless. He even sent an official letter to the devil faction, stating the terms. But the steps the devils started taking were escalating this event to war. First, the devils started spreading rumors about how their kingdom was using this incident as an excuse to conquer their lands. They had one legit point, and it was that after the Civil War, for 200 years, the devils did not cause any incident at this level. And yet, within 10 years of the Avalon Kingdom's birth, this huge incident occurred. But, it was well within Jiraiya and August's expectations. And just as those two expected, to maintain their pride, the devil faction did not play the main card. They did not point out that he defeated Xerxes, which could have diverted the supernatural world's attention to him. But the way the devils kept saying that the massacre was nothing but a part of a grand scheme made him want to snap some necks. Fortunately, it was pretty easy to defend their case, since this was not the first time the devil faction harmed the Yaokai. Even during their civil war, many of the Yaokai clans were forced to participate, and many of them perished. And after the invention of that bothersome evil pieces, many of the devils started to collect Yaokai. Last but not least, after releasing copies of the contract to the supernatural world, almost all the other factions either took a neutral position or indirectly pointed the finger at the devil faction. Up to this point, everything was still somewhat okay, but their following action completely broke all his restraints. Naruto had sent a small force to barricade and watch over the Nekashu compound. There was nothing left there, but he did not want the Nekashu's land to be ravaged anymore. He could not send a large force, since some might take it as an aggressive stance from their side. He also explicitly ordered the squad to stay inside the land no matter what. Nothing was amiss on the first few days. And then out of nowhere, the devil faction attacked the compound with full force. The unit took a heavy blow, with few deaths. The leader of the squad made a full retreat, otherwise they would have been completely wiped out. Then, the devils had the goal to play the victim when they attacked without any warnings. Their official statement about the attack was that until 1 week was over, they would not allow any Yaokai near their land, even though the Nekashu compound legally belonged to the Yaokai and was entirely outside of their land. Of course, they had put in other excuses. But just after the first line, Naruto burned the paper. And now the devils had decided to hide behind their greatest defense. Naruto finally approached his destination, one of the most highly secured guest rooms in the Avalon Palace. This room also worked as a small conference room, which was why he chose this place for their guests. He was not surprised to see Jiraiya in front of the door, who was wearing a blank mask similar to what Roots used to wear. Naruto just raised an eyebrow, silently telling Jiraiya to say his thoughts. We both know why. Jiraiya pointed at the door with his thumb. They are here. I know you can handle yourself. But just a suggestion, if things get complicated, back down. We can't have them get tangled in this. With that, Jiraiya opened the door and entered first to announce his arrival. But Naruto did not enter immediately. He looked up to see his reflection from the marble ceiling staring back at him. His lips slightly curved upward as he saw his normal azure eyes change into his special Rinnegan, where the sclera had a golden hue instead of the silver purple. After the transformation was done, he entered. The first one to catch Naruto's attention was the Archangel. And the reason for this was not his flashy dress or the unique holy power emitting from him but his expression. The moment Naruto entered, and the moment Michael saw him, the Archangel's eyes went wide, and just for a fraction of a second his power flickered. But Michael compassed himself quite fast. A slip-up came and went quickly, but Naruto caught it. The reason why most did not notice it was because all their attention was purely on Naruto. But he was sure Jiraiya sensed the abnormality as well since he was facing Michael. His eyes quickly scanned the other two guests as he approached his seat, one male and one female. He had read about their profiles before. Vasco Strada, one of the big shots in the church as he was ranked the second highest official in the church as cardinal priest. And then there was Griselda Quarta, famous for being the strongest female exorcist alive. His seat was not a grand throne in this room, everyone's seat here was the same. It was done to show equality. After he took his seat, everyone else did as well. Naruto had Yasaka sitting down to his right and August to his left. And on the opposite side of the table, Michael was in the middle while Vasco and Griselda sat left and right of him, respectively. And Jiraiya was standing by the door. Welcome to the Avalon Kingdom. I wish I could say it is an honor to have such esteemed guests in our humble kingdom, but we are not having this meeting to share our pleasantries, even though I wish it were the case. Not everything goes how we want them to be, right? Naruto started with a rueful smile. There was a pause. Finally, Michael coughed. It seemed, for some reason he looked quite out of it. Compassing himself once again, the Archangel started, please trust us when we say we also wished it to be different. And yet here you are. Naruto cut Michael off. He released a tired sigh and gazed over the other exorcists. Let's just cut the chit-chat, shall we? What did the devils ask you to do? This blunt question surprised his guests. There was a slight pause before Vasco implored, King Otsutsuki, we know that you are angry, and you have every right to be. But all we ask of you is to listen to us for a few minutes. The silence that lingered afterward was anything but comfortable, but in the end, Naruto gave them his consent. Releasing a deep breath, Vasco started his explanation. You want justice for the Nekashu, we all understand that. Unfortunately, the devils are reacting to this situation very poorly. And if this goes on, it can and will lead to war, we know that. And I am sure that neither side wants that outcome. But there is a reason as to why the devils are acting this way. Vasco paused at Naruto's reaction. He did not say anything, he just stared back. Coughing into his hand, Vasco continued, the devils believe that this is the work of the old Satan, especially Rizavum Lucifer. Ajuka did some tests on the devils for the possibility of being manipulated. And all the results came positive. They think that the old Satans are coming back to take control over the devil faction. And this is why they are trying to weaken the faction by pitting them with other strong factions. This is also the reason why they did not announce that you have defeated Surziches, except for a few individuals. Otherwise, the devils would have been targeted by other beings or organizations with devious motives. So what do you suggest we do? The question from Naruto brought down that eerie silence once again. We are not suggesting anything. We are only hoping that you will look into the bigger picture. This time it was Griselda who spoke up. Naruto thought Michael would be the one doing most of the talking, but it seemed he was wrong. And for some reason, the look he was getting from the Archangel felt quite unnatural. His gaze had a nostalgic look to it. Suddenly, Griselda's following words took his focus away. If you retaliate badly, both factions will only be doing exactly what Rizavum wants. But do not get us wrong, we also want the Nekashu clan to get their justice. We do not want this incident to be the catalyst of the next war. Are you done? The dumbstruck looks on his guests were priceless. First of all, your concerns are noted but unwanted. Let me tell you the truth then. Naruto relaxed on his chair and closed his eyes. I have mastered Senjutsu to the point I have awakened a few unique abilities. And one of the abilities allows me to directly use the spirit energy from a location to look into the past of that place. Of course, it has its restriction, but I will not divulge that. What I want to say is that I saw what happened at that compound. I know that the devils were influenced to throw the first attack. But, Naruto opened his eyes, and his guests filched. After all, the power he released through his eyes might be subtle. Still, it was not anything his guests were accustomed to. The atrocities committed by the devils cannot be brushed off by simply saying that they were influenced by a third party. They could have stopped but they did not. They went on killing and raping till there were none left. There is no excuse, no justification, for what they have done. Naruto felt his powers rising, he could see the sweat on his guest's forehead. But he could not stop. Fortunately, a gentle touch from his wife calmed down his raging emotions. Her aura brought him back before he lost himself in those horrific memories. Naruto grabbed her hand tightly and took a few short breaths. We are truly sorry to hear that, but rest assured that the new Satan will properly deliver their punishment, Vasco replied. So I am guessing the Heaven faction is trying to be the mediator in this situation. Naruto's gaze went over all three of them. If so, then I will ask again. What do you think is the best solution? The devils massacred the Nekashu clan, influenced by an enemy that they could not kill or imprison within 200 years. Pretty sure they also have the excuses ready for this. Then, they did not honor our contract. They refused to give the justice that the Nekashu clan deserves. I mean, when I went to the stadium to save the younger sister, who was completely innocent and unrelated to the event by the way, I saw many devils who took part in the crime were sitting there and going on with their lives. They did not have an ounce of guilt in them for what they did. Or, now they are going to say that someone also brainwashed them to act like this. The funniest part though, it did not end here, now did it? Just yesterday, they attacked the Nekashu compound again. I had sent a squad of 20 people who stayed only inside the compound to watch over the land, which in every way belongs to us. Then without any warnings or messages, the devils attacked with full force, 7 of our men were killed in action, and quite a few suffered serious injuries. And the best part in all of these, the devils are playing the victim again. Naruto smiled, but he was sure it didn't come out as intended, so tell me, what do you think is the best solution? The devils are in the wrong and so are their actions, no one is denying this. Finally, Michael spoke up, taking the center of everyone's attention, but if you take action similar to them, a war will break out. We are not here to defend what the devils did. We are here, hoping and trying that this does not escalate to war. And if everything fails, then the flames of war will spread to the human world and other factions again. If that happens, many people will die. Michael gave that unnatural look again, your people will die. Would you be okay with that? This caught Naruto off guard. And somehow, he could feel that there was something else hidden deep inside the Archangel's words. Do you know why we named our faction, the Avalon Kingdom? Everyone turned their gaze toward the speaker, who was none other than Yasaka. With a smile toward the guests, she continued, our king here has united all the yokai, be it a large prestigious clan or a small newly formed group, within 10 years, a feat that even the gods and goddesses from the Shinto faction dubbed as a miracle. Of course, fights had occurred and blood had been spilled. But it was still considered the most peaceful unification recorded since the birth of yokai. Then he made the most remarkable achievement that none of us had ever thought was possible. He made an alliance, a true union between the fairy faction and the yokai faction, without spilling a single drop of blood. He named this new allied faction, the Avalon Kingdom. Avalon, in fairies' terms, is similar to heaven. It is considered the ever-distant utopia for the fairies, untouched and uncontrolled by any being or laws. Our king liked the concept of that place so much that he named our kingdom after it, rather than giving it more of a yokai or Eastern culture-related name. And the way he presented the kingdom's name to us, his people, made fairies respect him, and yokai adore him. Yasaka gave Naruto's hand a light squeeze, also, the Avalon Kingdom of ours is not a faction. Because, to our king and our people, faction indicates a society of certain races or beings who follow certain gods or faiths. The Avalon Kingdom does not possess that prejudice. We take in and protect anyone, as long as you love the land you live in, respect everyone regardless of their race, and honor the rules that uphold the peace. And all this was made possible by our king, Naruto Otsutsuki. Then the smile left her face as she frowned, so if he asks us to go to war, we will gladly lay down our lives, knowing that he is doing so to protect our future, our freedom, our beloved, and our rights. And we will do it as many times as he asks because everyone in the Avalon Kingdom believes in him. After all, until now, he had always been our guiding star. So, I ask you, Lord Michael, do not judge our king's actions and values based on your beliefs on protecting a balance that does not exist. This was totally not on purpose, but Naruto let out a low whistle when his wife was done. There was no doubt in Naruto's mind regarding the actions that he had to take, and the recent actions of the devil solidified his resolve. But he would not lie, hearing the baddest speech of his queen did make him feel good. He faced the archangel and smiled, Lord Michael, you heard our queen. Also, that remark about the innocents dying the lives of many innocent yokai had already been lost. And more are still being killed by the devils. I do not know how you are looking at this, but to me, it seems they had already made the decision. Instead of giving us the justice that we seek, the devils want to protect their pride. And they will do it regardless of the consequences. Naruto started to rub his eyes as he released a deep breath, punish those that took part in the massacre, and execute the leaders of the raid. That is all we asked. We do not want any monetary benefits, nor do we not want the whole devil faction to be punished. It is so simple, and yet Naruto took another deep breath. After a pause, he shook his head, this is going nowhere, and then looked at August to his side, August, will you show our guest the way out? Now, this snapped them back to reality. And it seemed they had things to say, but Naruto knew how to shut them up. After all, he was not the Hokage for show. The way he sat and the way he looked at his guests was enough to tell them he had made his decision and would not hear a single word. They were welcome to try though. Basco and Griselda gave up quickly and got up. But Michael did not get up immediately. The stare down between the Archangel and the Yokai King continued for a few moments. Finally, Michael averted his gaze, not on his own, it was because Vasco called him out. Slowly they followed August, but just before leaving the room, Michael stopped, I have no right to say this, but please, I implore you again, reconsider this. He did not wait for any answer after that and just left. Jiraiya also followed the guests from behind, closing the door on his way out. When everyone was gone, Yasaka got up from her chair and knelt in front of Naruto, tightly holding both his hands. What are you afraid of, my love? Naruto chuckled. She still had the power to see through him, to understand his inner conflicts. Even though he had the Rinnegan, her eyes were more remarkable than his. They always had been, even now, without any special power, she could see through the masks and facades of her beloved ones. Letting out another chuckle, he bent down and kissed her hands, I am worried about the future. Yasaka did not say anything. Her silent support made him continue, every faction, big or small, will know about us, about our bloody and vicious entrance into the supernatural world. This may create some doubts and complications, which will affect the future relationship between our kingdom and other factions. Not only that, but there are also a lot of yokai clans and fairy societies out there. They will be in danger from now on. When he was done, Yasaka just smiled. But her expression said enough. Then she let out a cute scream as Naruto pulled her onto his lap and buried his face in her chest. This sucks. Yasaka giggled and started brushing his hair, you are not omnipotent, my love. You cannot control everything. But you can learn from this and make sure something like this won't happen to our people again. Michael is right about one thing though. People will die. Naruto whispered. Unfortunately, there will be casualties, yes. But what are the alternatives? Yasaka answered, you have seen how evil and ruthless this world can be. Even our previous world, which was full of fights and deaths, does not hold a candle to this one. Without power, words and beliefs alone are not enough to move people. Without spilling blood, no one can create a kingdom. But you did. Naruto blinked. Then he looked up to meet her warm gaze. She continued with that adorable smile of hers, even actual gods and goddesses consider your achievements as miracles, things they thought were impossible. But that's who you are. You can create miracles, not just with your words, but also with your power. Your power far surpasses all the gods and goddesses of Shinto faction combined. An unimaginable amount of power, but yet, you do not use it like the most. You use your powers, your beliefs, and your ideas to do the right thing, to create the correct path, no matter how hard it is. You always had. And I know that you will do the same this time as well. She kissed his forehead and then slowly got up from his lap. Dirty politics is not your specialty, my love. Leave that to us. You just sit down and create your miracles. Yasaka giggled again and gently pulled him up from his chair, but you cannot create those miracles if you are not yourself. Do not fret over what anyone else says to you. They are not you. They have limited vision, faulty beliefs. So, forget about those and, she poked her chest, listen to your heart. You will do the right thing. The silence this time was comforting. And suddenly, without a word, Naruto hugged his wife. She returned the hug and they just stood there like this for a couple of minutes. Finally, Yasaka tugged his jacket. After a tight squeeze, he reluctantly broke the hug. I love you, so much that's the first thing he said. He gave her a gentle kiss after his statement. It seems I need to change some of our plans. Yasaka raised an eyebrow after hearing that, whose cheeks were lightly pink right now. Naruto just laughed and gave her another kiss. You're right. I have been overthinking this too much. It is time I handle this situation Naruto style. X. The underworld. Roygun Belphegor, former head of the Belphegor clan and the second ranker of the raiding games, was monitoring the devil squads with an exhausted face. All the top raiding game champions were called and was asked to act as the overseers of the devil army stationed at the Nekashu compound. While most of the devils in the army were alert, none knew the depth of the situation they were in. She was in the stadium. She saw with her own eyes the state their mighty Surzich's Lucifer was put into by the Yokai King. And now the devils were poking the already angered dragon. Roygun looked at the moon. For some reason, to her, the color of the moon seemed to be different from the usual crimson color. It was like looking at a blood-stained eye. And the moon was like that after the declaration of the Yokai King. Or maybe, it was just her. Everything was escalating too fast and not in a good direction. The day the Yokai King gave the ultimatum, the Zekrom Bales group immediately went to work. A gag order was given to conceal the fact that the one and only Surzich's Lucifer had been put into a coma by an enemy. Even now, many of the devils do not know about this fact. The same day, the rest of the Satans and the Devil Council tried to take control of the incident. They were fabricating the event about the Nekashu and reaching out to the other factions to gain their sympathy. But the Avalon Kingdom was one step ahead of them. From what she had heard, the next 2 days, the devil persisted in this approach. They tried to raise doubts about the kingdom's motives and paint them in a bad light. That did not work either since the Avalon Kingdom put up solid defenses against such accusations. Then her faction did something that they should not have. On the 5th day, they attacked the Nekashu compound and drove away the Yokai unit stationed there. And it was not a simple attack, the devils went all out knowing what they were truly doing. They even went after the Yokai clans living in the underworld, but fortunately, all of them had moved away. It was a drastic and stupid move. Anyone could tell that the devils had invaded foreign lands and occupied those lands without giving any declarations. There was no logic, no reason behind such action. No, there was a reason. It was fear. Fear of other factions siding with the kingdom if the devil faction showed any weaknesses. Fear of Avalon Kingdom harming their faction. And most importantly, it was the fear of losing against such a small and newly formed faction. This attack of their faction was nothing but an act of provocation toward the Yokai King, and it was done deliberately. And that action showed her what path her faction had chosen. They had chosen war. Somehow, this did not surprise her. Lives would be lost because of these selfish acts, Roygun had no doubt about it. The easiest way to solve this was to give justice to the Nekashu. The solution was simple, but not the execution, since somehow, many nobles got tangled in this. Now the higher-ups were blaming the old Satans, saying that they influenced the devils. But she knew no one was going to buy this justification, even she did not fall for such a blatant lie. After all, if it were so easy to influence the devils, then the old Satan faction would have easily won the civil war. Roygun could see why such actions were being taken, and she was sure so could the reasonable devils. Bale clan wanted to protect the status quo, and they thought the only way to do so was to protect those nobles, since some of them were pretty high up. They also want to maintain the pride of the devils to satisfy the general populace. And this was their absurd solution, to force the Avalon Kingdom to come to an agreement that would benefit the devils most. She also heard that to have more power on their side, they had a meeting with the Heaven faction and the Grigori. In other words, the Bale clan was trying to pull the other two sides of the three faction into this mess. Even they, the rating game champions, were not excluded. Zekrom knew the corruption inside the rating game from the start, but he did not stop it. Why would he? After all, because of this, he had control over most of the champions. Unfortunately, all of them were too deep into the rating game corruption to go against his words, except for Diehauser Belial. But she was sure that even though Diehauser was clean, the old fox had other ways to have control over the #1 rating game champion. But this was not the worst part. They had to bring in their entire team. Now, this was what made Roygun angry. She was ready to die for her foolishness, but she would refuse to let any harm come to any of her peerages. She would do anything to protect them. Unfortunately, she knew that the world did not work that way. Not everyone had the luxury to hold their own fates in their hands. Lady Roygun, the unit is in position. Her queen, her surrogate younger sister, came to her side and started to read her the report. All of your peerage members are not having any problems with their positions. What about Bediz and Diehauser? Lord Bediz is making another patrol around the compound. And Lord Diehauser has returned to meet with Lord Ruvel. Her queen did not look at a report to answer those questions. The jobs of the rating game champions were simple: oversee the army unit situated around the compound. Inform the main army which was far away from the compound should they notice anything unusual. And they were to hold their position should there be an attack. So much exaggeration, Roygun sighed as she rubbed her forehead. At least she was able to take the position of the messenger, which was the last line of defense and furthest from the compound. She did not want her team to be anywhere near the compound. She even explicitly told her peerages to withdraw immediately should a fight break out, as she and her queen would protect their back. Return to your post. Hearing Roygun's command, her queen retreated. She opened the map again. There were 4 units, consisting of around a few hundred troops, stationed on the 4 sides of the compound. There was also an extra unit of 100 devils, their job was to circle the compound. And the main army was roughly a few hundred kilometers away from them, just outside of their border. Suddenly she felt it. The chill on her spine. The wind around her quieted down. She followed her instinct and looked up from the map toward the sky. And she blinked. Right on top of the compound, there was a flying ship, 1/4 the size of the compound. It's the enemy. The shout was not even finished. Shots were fired, seemingly from all sides of the ship. And just moments later, she could see fires engulfing all the areas where their armies were stationed. She quickly turned around to see the place where her peerages were also on fire. Without a second thought, she rushed there. She looked back when she heard the massive explosion. The ship was down. But before she could rejoice, 4 more emerged out of nowhere and took the fallen one's place. And they also immediately started firing. She could hear the screams of outrage, soon turning into cries for help. But she did not care, she had her own peerages to save. She almost made it to the camp without any problem. But at the very end, a single yokai stood there, blocking her path. She did not care about her opponent as she threw a sizable explosive energy blast. Her carelessness almost killed her if it was not for her years of honed instinct. The energy blade narrowly missed her neck. That woke her up. Even though she could see the camp where her peerages were, even though the said camp was on fire and she was hearing the sounds of fighting, she still put all her focus on the opponent in front of her. Her senses were telling her that one wrong move and the match would be over. After all, if the blade was aiming for her chest, she would not have come out scot-free. She started examining the woman in front of her. Her opponent was strong, no doubt about it, seeing how the blue-colored lightning was smoothly dancing around her body. But it was not the powerful lightning or her beauty that took her focus. It was the look on her opponent's face and her stance. Her stance told Roygun that it would be a fight to the death. With a defeated sigh, she introduced herself, Roygun Belphegor, the 2nd ranker of the rating games. Bugari, head of the Nakamata clan. Once again, her instinct managed to save her from another fatal strike. This time the Nakamata aimed at her eyes. And she did not stop there. The attacks kept coming, and even though she was fast, her opponent was quicker and swifter. After getting 2 more shallow cuts, she released a burst of power to get some distance and immediately readied her special magic. One of her specialties was earth magic. And due to the usage of her king piece, she had gained immense demonic power, which she used to unlock various powerful branches of earth magic. She immediately created tens of strong golems, all of which surrounded her to create a wall around her. But she was once again surprised by how precise the attack of that Nakamata was. She hit all the vital points of a golem, all the while dodging the onslaught of the golem's attacks. They were slow, but not this much as to how her opponent was showing. With astonishing speed and precision, she took down her golem wall within mere 10 seconds. But those 10 seconds were enough for her. Crack whip. Crack magic was the specialty of the Belphegor clan. And as a member of the Belphegor clan, Roy Gunn has shown incredible mastery in creating a tear on anything, even if it was flesh. But the problem was that to do so, she either would need her opponent to stay still for 1 second, or she would have to touch her opponent to have her magic take effect directly. Fortunately, she was able to improve crack magic further, even though she needed to use the king piece. The whip she created using her crack magic not only gave her the extra reach she needed, but also the movement of the whip was quite unpredictable, meaning it was not so easy to dodge. Right now, she only needed to land one solid blow to win the match. But the speed and the agility of her opponent were nothing to scoff at. So, the battle was all about who could land first lethal hit. 5 minutes, it took 5 whole minutes to land her first decisive blow on the Nakamata. Her opponent was not using the lighting to move around, she was also using the same lightning to create blades of different sizes to reach her. It seemed her opponent knew about her magic, she knew that if she were to touch Roy Gunn's skin directly, she would be affected by the crack magic. So, she tried to use a lightning-based elemental weapon to strike her. Fortunately for Roy Gunn, her crack magic was affecting her opponent's lightning attacks as well. Otherwise, she would have lost long ago. But, her opponent was a fast learner. She kept hitting the same places so many times that the magic she used to coat her skin was wearing down faster than she was comfortable with, and she was moving so fast that her attack could not keep up with her. The precision of her attacks and the flexibility of her movements, they were insane. She was able to hit her a few times, but they were only grazes. But finally, she was able to land a solid hit. Magari faltered, and it gave her the perfect opportunity to take the next shot to finish this match. But then it happened again. All of her senses started screaming at her. The clothes Magari had on her were torn apart by the intense lightning she started creating. The lightning she was using before was blue in color, and now it was completely dark purple. Her legs starting from her knees, her arms starting from her elbows, and the tips of all her 7 tails and ears were completely covered in lightning. Roy Gunn did not even blink. She was sent flying. She immediately tried to reinforce her body and adjust herself in midair, but a solid kick on her throat broke her concentration. And it was the brutal attack on her head that told her that she was going to die, no questions about it. Her magic was not fast enough to affect her opponent, but even with all the odds against her, she did not give up. She could not. She kept trying to reinforce and replenish her magic using the full power of her king piece. But it was futile. Her magic was depleting faster than she could replenish, and the injuries were now becoming more fatal. As her vision started to blur, she tried to concentrate her senses on the camp. At least, she wanted to make sure that her peerages made it out alive. And suddenly, the attack stopped. She blinked a few times to adjust her vision as she shakily tried to take a defensive stance. When she could finally focus on Magari, she saw that her opponent also had a surprised look on her face. And the reason was that her lightning was gone. Then she felt him beside her. "Sorry, I'm late," Daihauser said. Immediately, the Nakamata jumped back. Not because of Daihauser, but because flames consumed the area she was standing on. "Urval," she shouted, her voice hoarse. The next heir of the Phoenix clan did not turn to look at her as he pressed on the attack. Another loud explosion took away her focus. She looked up and her jaw dropped slightly. Eve, the fabled flying warship, was here. She never saw it this up close. It was easily 10 times the size of the Yaokai bombarding ships. Another huge sound came from the warship, and she looked ahead to see another of the Yaokai ship was destroyed in an instant. The remaining 2 Yaokai ships started focusing their fires on their warship, but it seemed it had an energy barrier that was properly shielding the ship. "The main army has already started moving," Roy Gunn raised her eyebrows at the statement. Daihauser just nodded at her and then looked in front. Her lightning ability is powerful, but the concept is simple. She understood what he meant. As a member of the House of Belial, Daihauser was able to nullify the abilities of people or objects. However, he first had to understand the concepts of the ability in order to render it worthless. The more complicated the concept behind the ability was, the more time it would take for him to use his ability. But if the concept were simple, it would take mere seconds. Just like how it literally took him 2 seconds to cut down her golem wall in one of the raiding games. She turned to look at the Nakamata, who was having a hard time defending against Ruvel without her lightning powers. It seemed her lightning element was not complex for Daihauser to decipher. Still, Leiden Zanjitsuha. She felt a unique energy. It came out of nowhere. She looked up at the source of the power. The warship that changed the tides of the early battles in the Civil War, the warship that took the hits of the old Satans and still survived, was collapsing. There was a black orb in the middle of the warship, and it was slowly increasing in size while destroying the ship and pulling everything inside of it. It looked like a small black hole. Suddenly her scenery changed. She blinked. There was nothing in the sky now. She looked down to see the familiar muscular hand tightly holding her. She blushed, but just for a second before her gaze stopped at the place they were standing. Green energy flame was covering that place. She finally understood what happened. Someone attacked where they were standing and she did not even notice, let alone react to it. And if it was not for Daihauser moving her away she shuddered at the thought. Then she saw him. He was a handsome and tall young man with fair skin, pointed ears, and knee-length silver hair. He was wearing an elegant-looking kimono with samurai-type armor on top of it and there was a huge fur on top of his right shoulder. And one look at the sword he was wielding told her that it was a very dangerous weapon. Yet it was the wielder that scared her. As the green fire dissipated, her eyes landed on the kneeling Ruvel, who was just a few feet away from the dangerous man. It seemed to her that he got caught in the fire attack at point-blank range. She wanted to shout but she could not. The man just walked past him without a care. And suddenly Ruvel fell down on the ground. Then she understood. Although Daihauser dodged a green fire attack along with her, it was not aimed at them. The attack was meant for Ruvel. And she could sense it. Ruvel Phoenix, the heir of the Phoenix clan, was dead. Roigun, Daihauser grabbed her attention, she looked at him, still unable to comprehend what was happening. Retreat. It was this word that made all her senses come back. But before she could retort, he continued, his eyes not moving away from the man, retreat and regroup with the main force. Tell them what happened and wait for Lord Ajuka's arrival. If he does not arrive within the time limit and if you do not receive any messages from me by that time make a full retreat. Do not wait for anyone other than Lord Ajuka. Roigun wanted to object. She wanted to stay. She knew Daihauser was a Satan-class devil and was a monster even by their terms and it was all his power unlike her. But the man in front of them was dangerous, she could feel it. The fights between these two individuals would only end with one of them dying. Go, she did not want to. She did not want to lose any more of her precious people. But she had no choice. She stood on her toes and kissed him on the cheek before leaving the place. And the moment she was out of their sight, she heard an explosion. She choked on a sob. Someone, stop this nightmare. Thanks for watching guys, hope you enjoyed this one. If you do please leave a like, share and subscribe, take care, bye.